A girl was married off by her own father like a debt. Her husband, a poor security guard. But the truth behind it all stunned the entire city. You won't believe who this man truly is, or how this young woman became a symbol of loyalty and dignity. The air in Okeechobee, Florida always carried the scent of dry earth and cheap tobacco, where rusted porch roofs, aging pickup trucks, and people who'd grown used to loss filled the landscape. And in the middle of that sun-drenched, wind-worn land lived a girl named Savannah Lee. Her eyes looked like a storm held back, hidden behind the quiet demeanor of a waitress barely in her 20s. Everyone who looked at Savannah saw she was beautiful, but few cared to look long enough to notice the calluses in her gaze, formed by tears, endurance, and nights no one asked about. Ever since her mother died of cancer, her father, Howard Lee, was no longer the man who used to take her fishing every Sunday. He had become a shadow of himself, sunken into alcohol, bitterness, and silence. Then came Claudia, the woman with strong perfume and a heart of ice. The small 3-bedroom house turned into a cage without locks. Savannah was kicked out of her bedroom and forced to sleep in the storage room next to the kitchen, surrounded by canned beans and the mildew of dead rats. She woke before dawn to sweep the yard, milk the cow, hand wash clothes, then bike 3 miles to Rosie's Diner, where she faked smiles for customers who never bothered to remember her name. To Claudia, she was unpaid help. "Don't look at me with that ungrateful face," the woman would sneer. "You should be thankful we're feeding you." And Howard? He just sat in front of the TV, beer in hand, saying nothing. Silence, too, can be a form of violence. And Savannah lived in it every day. Everyone in Okeechobee knew the girl had it rough. But in poor places, kindness is often weaker than the fear of getting involved. So people only watched, nodded sadly, then turned away. And it would have stayed that way until Tyler Brooks showed up. He arrived in a coughing old truck, worn-down boots, and the steady eyes of a man who knew hunger. No one knew where he came from. He just knocked on the door, asked for work, and got straight to it. Patching the tin roof, fixing barn planks, clearing dry wood out back. He worked without complaint, without demand, even if his meals were nothing but cold rice and canned beans. 3 months passed. Savannah barely spoke to him, but she watched. There was something about Tyler, something that didn't belong to this place. The way he stayed quiet when insulted. The way he quietly set aside a plate for Savannah whenever she came home late from the diner. Once, she caught him reading an old book about construction engineering. He looked up and smiled gently. "I still study, even if I'm holding on to my dream with just 2 fingers." Then one sweltering afternoon, thick as molasses in the air, Tyler walked up to Howard, sweat soaking his shirt. He had reached his limit. "I need to be paid," he said, voice calm. Howard sat in a creaky chair, gripping his 4th beer of the day, staring at him like a stray dog begging for scraps. "Haven't sold any cattle yet. Come back next week." "It's been 3 months." Howard glanced around the yard, and his eyes stopped on Savannah, kneeling at the porch, scrubbing dried mud off the cement steps. A crooked, sarcastic smile curled at his lips. "You want money?" Tyler nodded. "I've earned it." "Then take the girl." The air froze. Tyler thought he misheard. "Excuse me?" Howard pointed at his daughter. "Take her, get her out of here. That's your payment." Savannah froze. The scrub brush fell from her hand. She turned around, eyes wide with panic. "Dad, no!" "Shut your mouth," he roared. "You should be grateful someone wants you." Claudia crossed her arms, nodding in satisfaction. "One less mouth to feed. Perfect." Savannah dropped to her knees, trembling hands clinging to her father's leg. "Please, I don't want to go. I'll be good. I promise. I'll do everything." "Shut up!" No one stepped in. No one protested. Only the wind swept across the red dust yard. Tyler looked at her. Really looked. In her tear-filled eyes, he saw more than fear. He saw life. A fire that had never gone out, even buried beneath ash. "She's really beautiful," he murmured. Howard frowned. "What did you say?" Tyler took a breath. "Fine, I'll take her." No one said goodbye. No hugs. No well wishes. Savannah stuffed a few clothes into an old torn black plastic bag and stepped silently toward the gate. Behind her, Claudia leaned in the doorway, arms crossed, looking no different than someone taking out the trash. Howard didn't glance up, just cracked open another beer with a dry hiss and sank into his chair. Only one person watched her leave. Eli, her 8-year-old half-brother, hiding behind the chicken coop. His eyes were red, one hand clutching a toy car missing a wheel. When Savannah turned for one last look, he barely managed a small wave before ducking down like he was afraid to be seen. Savannah turned away. Her heart felt torn in two. Tyler opened the rusted truck door and helped her climb in. The engine groaned to life, and they pulled away down the dusty red road. No one chased them. No one cared. They were silent the entire drive. Fields of wild grass, grazing cattle, and lonely gas stations flickered by through the dusty window. Savannah sat curled by the window, sunset light glinting off her tangled hair. She didn't know where she was going. She didn't know who this man beside her truly was. But she knew one thing. There was nothing left for her back there. And in the quiet, she whispered a prayer. God, please, don't let this man be like my father. Please give me a little peace. I'm so tired. Tyler didn't speak. He just drove, eyes fixed on the road. Occasionally, he glanced at her in the mirror. She sat curled up, hugging her bag like it held the last bit of her life. The sight tightened something in his chest. They reached West Palm Beach just as the sun disappeared. The city appeared like another world. Bright streetlights, flickering signs, and endless noise. Savannah squinted, overwhelmed. She had never seen buildings so tall or heard sounds so loud. Tyler turned into a quiet alley lined with drooping trees that offered shade and shelter. At the end stood a large black iron gate with a polished brass plaque. "We're here," he said, stepping out to open the gate. Savannah followed, her worn shoes squeaking from cold sweat. But as the gate opened, she froze. Inside was a pristine courtyard. Stone paths wound through lush green grass. Garden lights glowed softly, illuminating a white house with red roof tiles. It looked like something out of a postcard. In the corner, a small fountain gurgled as sparrows dipped in for a drink. Savannah stood stunned. Everything was so clean, so peaceful, so far from the rotting house she had just left. But Tyler didn't stop at the main house. He led her around to the back where there was a smaller home. Gray walls, fresh tin roof, white curtains fluttering in the window. "This is where I stay," he said, unlocking the door. "The owner's kind. Gave me this place when I started working as a security guard here." Inside was a tidy space, a small living room, a neat kitchen, and a clean bedroom with bed sheets that smelled like sunshine. It wasn't luxurious, but to Savannah, it was enough to make her want to cry. For the first time in her life, she had stepped into a place she could call home and not feel afraid. "You can stay here," Tyler said softly. Savannah didn't respond. She walked over to the window and gently touched the curtain. Just a simple piece of fabric, but something far more luxurious than anything she'd ever had in her old kitchen. She turned around, her eyes shimmering. "Thank you. Thank you for not leaving me behind." Tyler looked at her for a moment, then nodded. "You're safe here, I promise." That night, as Savannah lay on the clean bed in a quiet room, no shouting, no looks of disdain, she hugged the white pillow, closed her eyes, and whispered a silent thought. "If this is God's plan, maybe I'll believe again." Savannah woke to the smell of fried eggs and coffee wafting through the air. She opened her eyes to soft morning light slipping through the curtain, gentle as a mother's touch. For the first time in years, she wasn't awakened by yelling or banging on doors. Just quiet. And the smell of warm food. She slipped on a jacket and stepped out of the room, moving as gently as if she were afraid to break the dream. In the small kitchen, Tyler stood with his back to her, flipping something in a pan. He wore a gray t-shirt, his hair slightly tousled, his movements calm and measured. "Good morning," she said softly. Tyler turned and smiled. "Good morning, Savannah. I made a little breakfast. Hope you don't mind eggs and toast." She shook her head shyly. "It smells amazing. Thank you." They ate in silence, but not the kind of silence that hurts. Each bite warmed not only her stomach, but a heart long starved of kindness. After the meal, Tyler placed the dishes in the sink, then turned to her. "You doing okay? Is the room comfortable enough?" Savannah nodded slightly. "I don't even know what to say. I've never been treated like this before." She paused, then added quietly, "At home, I slept under the kitchen sink. Above me were rats." Tyler didn't ask more. He simply placed a hand on the table and said gently, "From now on, no more rats, no more yelling, No more tears for people who don't deserve them. Savannah looked at him, her eyes full of surprise. It had been so long since someone truly listened, without judgment. The days that followed passed quietly. Tyler didn't talk much, but he left traces of care in everything he did. He took out the trash before she woke, bought a new tube of toothpaste when he saw hers was flat, and placed a ceramic mug next to the sink that read, "You matter." To Savannah, those small gestures meant more than any bouquet or hollow compliment she'd ever heard from customers at the diner. One afternoon, they sat on the porch, watching the orange sunlight paint the backyard gold. Tyler was fixing a door hinge while Savannah sat on the step, holding a cup of ginger tea. "Tyler," she said hesitantly. "Yeah?" "When my dad said I was just a thing he could give away, I felt like trash. Like no one would ever want me." Tyler put the screwdriver down and turned to her. His face wasn't angry, just silent, as if he were absorbing every word she said. "I thought you'd be like them. I thought you'd ask for something, that you'd make me cook, clean, or worse." Her voice grew smaller. "But you didn't. You made me food. You asked if I was okay. You let me sleep." A tear slid down her hand. "I don't get it. Why?" Tyler sat beside her. He didn't answer right away. He just looked at her for a long moment, then said gently, "Because you deserve it." "But I'm nothing. I'm not educated. I'm not as pretty as other girls. He cut her off gently. "Savannah, who told you you're not pretty? Who told you you're nothing? You're the only person I've ever seen clear a table with sorrow in her eyes and still be polite. The only one who smiled at others while the world turned its back on her. You have strength, you have a heart, and you have something rich people often lack: dignity." She looked at him. Her eyes were full of tears, but her lips curled into a soft smile. "I don't love you yet, Tyler," she whispered, "but I'm starting to trust you." He nodded. "I don't need your love right now. I just want you to feel safe. Real love never demands anything you're not ready to give." A breeze rustled through the porch, carrying the scent of grass and distant cicadas. Savannah rested her head on his shoulder, not out of love, not yet, but for something far more sacred: trust. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like a bargaining chip, not an unwanted daughter. She was a human being, and for the first time, she started to believe she could be loved the right way. 2 weeks after Savannah arrived in West Palm Beach, the little house behind the white mansion was no longer quiet. In the humble kitchen, the clinking of pots, the scent of baked bread, and the occasional burst of laughter began to fill the air. Every morning, Savannah woke before Tyler. She cleaned the floor, folded blankets, and set the table with the precision of someone who never dared expect others to care for her. But this time, she didn't do it out of fear. She did it because she wanted to. Tyler never stopped her, but whenever he saw her standing too long in the kitchen, he would always walk in and ask, "Want me to do the dishes?" A small question. But to Savannah, it was silent proof. She didn't have to carry it all alone anymore. One Sunday morning, while Savannah was hanging blankets on the line behind the house, a gentle voice called from the gate. "You must be Savannah, right?" She turned around. A woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair and a beige dress was smiling. Her eyes were kind, and she stood with the grace of someone long accustomed to self-possession. "Yes, I'm Savannah," she replied softly. "I'm Margaret Bellamy, the homeowner. I live in the main house up front. Tyler mentioned a little about you." Savannah's heart tightened. I'm sorry if I've caused any trouble." Margaret waved her hand and stepped closer. "Number, you've been wonderful. The garden hasn't looked this clean in years. And yesterday, I had the chicken soup you made. It was delightful. I wanted to ask, would you like to be my head cook?" Savannah froze. "You mean cook for the main house?" Margaret nodded. "My previous chef just moved back to California with her daughter. I need someone reliable. And Tyler says you don't just cook. You cook with heart." The young woman brought a hand to her mouth as tears welled up unexpectedly. You really think I could do that job?" Margaret took her hand. "I don't just think. I see it." Savannah nearly collapsed to the ground in tears, but instead, she bit her lip and steadied her voice. "Thank you. I'll do my very best." That afternoon, She stood in front of the mirror in the small guest house room, arms wrapped around a freshly washed apron Margaret had just given her. In the reflection, she saw a new version of herself, not the discarded country girl who had been cast out of her home, but a woman beginning a journey of dignity. She turned toward Tyler, who was fixing a loose doorknob. Tyler, yeah? I want to go back to school. He looked up, surprised. School? I want to go to college. I used to be a top student in high school, but after my mom passed, I dropped out to work. Every time I washed dishes at the diner, I'd think, if I'd stayed in school, maybe life would have been different. Tyler rested an elbow on his knee and nodded. What do you want to study? I'm not sure. Maybe nursing or psychology. I want to help people the way you helped me. He didn't say anything. He just stood, walked over, and gently placed a hand on her shoulder. If that's your dream, I'll find a way to help you chase it. Savannah let out a soft laugh, her eyes sparkling. Don't make promises too soon. I just want to start by believing I'm worthy of learning. Then I'll believe first, Tyler replied. I'll believe until you're strong enough to believe with me. That evening, in the mansion's main kitchen, Savannah stood before a gleaming stainless steel stove. Fresh ingredients were laid out on the counter. Margaret stood nearby, quietly observing. She's young, Margaret thought, but there's something in her eyes that makes you want to believe in her. And so, amid the boiling pots, the sound of knives slicing vegetables, and the aroma of herbs in the air, a new chapter began. Savannah was no longer the girl forced out of her home like a commodity. She was becoming someone who chose her own path, and for the first time she believed the future was something she could actually reach. Monday morning began like any other. Savannah entered the mansion's kitchen before sunrise, tied her hair back neatly, gloved her hands, and started baking cinnamon waffles, Margaret's favorite. No one warned her that today would change everything. As she was arranging the waffles on a tray, the kitchen door suddenly swung open. A tall man in a white shirt, half-buttoned, stood leaning against the doorframe. He didn't knock, didn't greet, just leaned there like the whole house belonged to him. You must be Preston? Savannah asked cautiously. He smirked, a cocky, smug grin. My mom said the new cook was great, but she didn't say you were this pretty. Savannah felt a chill down her spine. She looked away, continuing to place vegetables into a basket. Good morning, sir. I'm preparing breakfast for Mrs. Margaret. Preston didn't leave. He walked in further and pulled out a chair beside the kitchen table. You know, I didn't believe her when she said you had spirit. I figured she just dragged someone in from the church again. But seeing you now, I think I should take a closer look. Savannah stayed composed, slicing tomatoes. I'm just doing my job, sir. Please don't disturb me. Preston laughed and tapped the table. Hey, no need to be so serious. I just came to say hi. Maybe invite you for coffee after your shift. She looked up, firm but polite. Thank you, but I'm married, and I love my husband very much. This time Preston's smile faded slightly, but then he gave a mocking shrug, stood, and stretched lazily. You live with that security guard in the guest house, right? You call that a husband? He tilted his head, smirking. You could have so much more, Savannah. Everything. If you just walked away from him. Savannah's grip tightened on the knife. She steadied her voice. I think you should leave the kitchen. I'm not comfortable. Preston shrugged and backed toward the door. Before leaving, he looked over his shoulder and said softly, Think about my offer. A woman like you shouldn't waste her youth in a tiny room with broken dreams. When the door finally shut, Savannah braced herself against the counter, breathing heavily. Her palms were slick with cold sweat, though the kitchen remained cool, not because she was weak, but because an old fear had returned, this time with charm, wealth, and the same poison underneath. That night she said nothing. Tyler was the same as always. Asked if she'd eaten, told her about the stray cat in the garden, then turned on his reading light. But Savannah lay facing the wall, eyes wide open in the dark. The next morning, Preston returned. This time he didn't play coy. I'll send you to college, Savannah. Any university, Boston, Seattle, even London. I've got friends everywhere. She turned, standing tall. I've already told you, Mr. Preston. I'm not interested. It's not that you're not interested, he said, stepping closer. You're afraid. You think that man is going to lift you out of this kitchen. He can't even buy you proper shoes. You're locking yourself in a cage of poverty. Savannah didn't flinch. Then I choose poverty with someone who loves me, over wealth in the arms of someone who sees me as a toy. Preston laughed, no longer friendly. You'll regret it. Number I'll only regret forgetting who I am. He walked away without another word. But Savannah knew. This wasn't over. That evening she sat on the porch with Tyler, who was fixing a misaligned window latch. She looked at him for a long time before speaking. Tyler. Yeah? Preston came back. He offered to send me to college, promised money, cars, a future. Tyler looked up, silent for a few seconds. And what did you say? Savannah looked him straight in the eye. I said no. I told him I believe in us. Tyler set the wrench down and walked to her. He didn't ask anything more. He just held her tightly. I'm proud of you. You're stronger than anyone I've ever known. Savannah closed her eyes, grateful, but far from at peace. Because she knew people like Preston didn't stop when rejected, and the real challenge might still be ahead. Savannah couldn't sleep. The AC hummed steadily in the small room, but it couldn't quiet the unease in her chest. 3 nights had passed since her last encounter with Preston, and she felt like she was living on a ticking clock. She hadn't told Tyler, not to hide anything, but because she didn't want to hurt him. Still, she knew. Silence too long becomes its own kind of betrayal. That morning, while Margaret sipped tea in the back garden, Savannah made her choice. No more hiding. She walked straight up, shoulders back, gaze steady, a small fresh cut still visible on her hand from a slip in the kitchen the night before. Mrs. Margaret, she began, voice calm. The older woman looked up and smiled. Good morning, dear. Come, sit, have some chamomile tea. Savannah shook her head. I need to speak with you, something serious. Margaret set her cup down, tilting her head. All right, what is it, my dear? Savannah clasped her hands tightly. It's about Mr. Preston. He has harassed me multiple times. From inappropriate comments to promises of money, school, even asking me to leave my husband for him. The air felt like it had been sucked out of the garden. Margaret stared at her, unblinking. But instead of outrage or shock, she smiled, a strange smile, as if she'd expected this all along. Savannah, she said slowly, you're a smart girl. And beautiful. Don't you think you might be overreacting? Savannah froze. Ma'am, Preston is a young man, successful. Sometimes men get a little impulsive, but you should be sensible too. We've given you shelter, a job. What more could you want? I'm not a beggar, ma'am, Savannah said, her voice trembling. I've worked for everything I've received. I've never taken what I didn't earn. But today I was humiliated. Margaret folded her arms. Her eyes turned cold. Do you really think you'll go far in life without help? What do you have? A poor girl's name? A husband living in the guest house? Savannah's knuckles turned white as she clenched her fists. I have dignity, ma'am, and a husband who loves me. Not because I'm pretty, not because I'm obedient, but because I'm me. Margaret was silent for a long moment. Then she sighed, disappointed. I don't want to make things hard for you, Savannah. But if you truly want to go to college, if you want a future, you should think carefully. Preston can give you everything. Tyler, he can only offer dreams and poverty. Savannah stood abruptly. Her palms were bleeding from her nails digging into her skin. I'd rather wash dishes for the rest of my life than sell myself for tuition. I don't need anyone pricing my worth like I'm a product. And if this is a place where a woman's value is measured by obedience and endurance, then I can't stay. Margaret rose too, her gaze sharp as glass. Then you intend to leave? Savannah nodded. If Mr. Preston continues this behavior, and if you continue to defend it, then my husband and I will pack our things and leave. Immediately. And what do you think you'll live on? Tyler's spare change? A tiny apartment where no one even knows your name? Savannah took a deep breath, her eyes glistening, but not weak. I'd rather live in a small room filled with real love than in a mansion where every step requires me to bow my head. Then she turned and walked away from the flower-filled garden, which felt colder than the morning frost. That night, Savannah told Tyler everything. He sat in stunned silence, then clenched his fists. I'm sorry, Tyler whispered. I couldn't protect you. No, she shook her head. You protected me by being the only one who'd never touched my dignity. They sat together, saying nothing more, but deep down, they both knew tomorrow they might not be staying here. And if that were the case, they would start again, from nothing, but this time on their own feet. The next day brought rain, Florida rain, sudden, cold, and fierce, like a flood washing away the fatigue of long, dusty days. Savannah stood by the yellowed window, holding her old jacket, her mind blank. Tyler had gone out early that morning without saying where. He'd left his phone on the table. That worried Savannah, not because she didn't trust him, but because her heart trembled like something big was about to happen. And it was. That afternoon, as she was cleaning their small room, there was a knock at the door. Firm, intentional. Savannah opened it. Standing there under the porch roof, rain still clinging to their coats, were Margaret and Preston. She stood tall. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Margaret, Mr. Preston." Margaret spoke first, her voice unusually soft. "Savannah, we came to apologize." Savannah's eyes widened in surprise. Preston bowed his head, something he'd never done before. "I behaved like a fool," he said, voice clear. "I was blinded by what I wanted, and I didn't respect you or your marriage. I'm sorry." Savannah stood in silence for a moment, but what shocked her even more was Margaret's expression, an unfamiliar look of respect. What happened?" she asked carefully. Margaret stepped inside and set down her umbrella. "Tyler came to see us this morning." Savannah gasped. "What did he say?" "Not just say," Margaret said. "He told us everything." She paused, then looked her in the eyes. "Savannah, Tyler is my son." The room seemed to stop. Savannah froze. She looked at Margaret, then Preston, and finally gasped. "No, that's not possible." "It's true," Preston nodded. "He's my older brother, the sole legal heir to Bellamy Holdings. But years ago, he walked away from it all. He told me he was just a security guard. He did it because he was tired," Margaret explained. "Tired of relationships built on money. Every woman who came near him had an empty purse and a plan. Until he met you." Savannah could barely breathe. I didn't know. I swear." "We know," Margaret said gently. "And that's why we're not here to accuse. We're here to say, you changed him." Tears streamed down Savannah's cheeks, not from shame or shock, but because her heart was pounding. Not because her husband was wealthy, but because he had hidden the truth just to preserve what was real between them. That afternoon, Tyler returned as the rain began to ease. He stepped inside and saw Savannah sitting quietly, eyes red. She stared at him. "Who are you?" Tyler stopped. A sad smile crossed his face. "I'm the man who shoveled manure at your farm," he said softly. "The one who made you breakfast, the first peaceful meal of your life. The man who loved you when you had nothing, and who hopes you'll still love me, now that you know I have everything." Savannah stepped forward, tears running down her face. She didn't speak. She just punched him lightly in the chest. Then again. "You lied to me. You hid this from me." "I was afraid to lose you," Tyler whispered. "Then, you owe me," she said, laughing through tears. "At least a new car, and a house that doesn't leak when it rains." He burst into laughter and pulled her into his arms. "Deal," he said, holding her so tightly she could hear his heart pounding with relief and love. That evening, they had dinner beneath the warm golden lights of the main mansion's living room. Margaret smiled like a mother seeing her son return, not just in body, but in spirit. Savannah sat beside Tyler, hand in hand. Preston poured the wine, this time without jokes or mockery. There was silence, but it was peaceful, like everyone was waiting for the door to the future to open. And this time, it didn't open because of money. It opened because of truth. And that truth gave each of them something bigger: love, gratitude, and a second chance. This time, with their whole hearts. The months passed like rain trickling through the streets of the old town. Quiet, but steady. Savannah no longer lived in the small guest house behind the mansion. She and Tyler had moved, not out of bitterness, but to begin a new chapter on their own. They rented a small apartment near the West Palm Beach shoreline, just minutes from the sand. In the morning, Savannah brewed coffee early while Tyler fixed up the old space, preparing to open a small bakery and breakfast cafe, their shared dream. No need for mansions, wine, or diamond rings, just an oven, a ringing bell, and the scent of cinnamon waffles filling the air. Savannah attended night classes at the local community college. Starting with Intro to Psychology, she carried an old backpack, her notebook filled with crooked handwriting, but her eyes shone with belief. One afternoon after class, she returned to find Tyler standing in the middle of the bakery in progress, still fixing the sign out front. He turned, grinning from ear to ear. "Guess what?" "What?" He pulled out a stack of printed papers. "We got our business license. Approved." Savannah screamed and threw her arms around him, crying like a child. "We're really starting." "Yeah," Tyler whispered, "from this little kitchen to our very own bakery." 2 years later, Savannah stood on stage at the University of South Florida, dressed in her cap and gown, diploma in hand. In the crowd, Tyler leapt to his feet when her name was called, clapping like the world needed to know that was his wife. After the ceremony, he hugged her tightly among hundreds of students and proud families. "You did it," he whispered. "You're my queen, the queen of your own life." Savannah laughed, tears streaking her cheeks, holding him as if embracing every version of her past. The girl who was once traded like a debt, now rising like royalty on the stage of her life. 1 year later, Tyler took her to a plot of land by a small lake north of the city. "What are we doing here?" she asked, flowers still on her hands. He handed her a set of golden keys. "This is your home," he said. "I promised you a house. I kept my word." Savannah was speechless. Before them stood a classic white villa with red-tiled roof, a garden blooming with lavender, and behind it, a lake still as glass. She walked slowly inside, where everything reflected her. An open kitchen, a bookshelf, a reading nook, a nursery. "Tyler, I don't know what to say. Just tell me you love it. That's enough." She held him for a long time in the empty room, though their hearts were full. A few weeks later, Savannah stood frozen in the bathroom, pregnancy test in hand. She stepped out, voice shaking as she held out the result. "Tyler." "Yeah?" "You're going to be a dad." He went still, then lit up, rushing to scoop her into his arms, spinning her around. "Oh God, thank you for sending her to me. And now, this little angel too." 9 months later in the hospital, Savannah gave birth to a healthy baby girl with eyes bright as jewels. Tyler kissed her forehead and whispered, "This little one will grow up knowing how strong her mother truly was." Savannah smiled weakly, looking at her daughter, then at him. "And she'll know. Love doesn't have to begin with wealth. Just two people walking together. That's enough." When it came time to name their daughter, they called her Hope, because that was what Savannah had never truly had, but had now given herself. This was no longer the story of a girl abandoned, traded, or overlooked. It had become the story of a wife, a mother, a queen of her own life. She was once considered a burden. Now she was a business owner, a college graduate, and the mother of a girl named Hope. They didn't win with money. They won with faith, loyalty, and unconditional love. So if you've ever been underestimated, remember, even the seeds buried deepest can bloom the brightest.